Hi, this is Nanette Hosenfeld with the Great Basin Fire Potential Outlook for July through September 2017. Over the course of this briefing, we will look at our recent weather, look at the current drought conditions. We will see how those two tie into the state of our fuels. We will take a look at El Nino and La Nina. We'll discuss the expected weather for July through September, and finally we will go over the fire potential outlook for July through September. We'll start by looking at the precipitation over the winter and spring periods. This image on the left shows the precipitation percent of average for the December through February time period. And these green colors are areas that received over 125, even greater percent of average precipitation. You can see that pretty much the entire Great Basin is included in that category with a lot of green across the area. However, it's interesting to note that as we moved into the spring, March through May, things really dried out quite a bit, especially across the southern part of the Great Basin. You can see these areas in brown across the south and the southeastern part of our area that are quite dry. That's below 75% of normal. So we were quite wet moving into February and then dried out, especially across the south in the March through May time period. That really is critical as far as our fine fuel loading. These areas highlighted on the map are places that we've had reports of well above normal fine fuel loading. And this is really tied to that above normal precipitation that we saw across the Great Basin over the winter months and the early part of the spring. We are having reports of above normal fine fuel loading and continuity across much of the lower and mid elevation areas highlighted on the map. So far, fine fuels have been the main driving force of fire spread early this fire season. So these are playing a huge factor moving into this fire season. So over the past month, it's been quite hot and dry across the majority of the Great Basin. This image on the left shows that pretty much the entire Great Basin has been above normal as far as temperature through June. Looking at precipitation on the right, again, about the southeastern 2/3, 3/4 of the Great Basin has been below normal as far as precipitation, and really below normal. These dark red colors are less than 25 and even less than 5% of normal, so quite dry across the southeastern parts of the area. A little more moisture has been observed further north. You can see northwestern Nevada, and just a small sliver of southwestern Idaho has seen a fair amount of precipitation over the past month, but really quite dry across the majority of the area. The drought monitor is showing some areas of abnormal dry conditions, mainly across southeastern Utah and southern Nevada. As we look at the drought outlook moving into September, the forecast is for no drought across the Great Basin. So what about our fuels? How do we look as we're entering fire season? So the 1,000-hour fuels, as you would expect from the dry conditions across the south, are quite dry across the south. You can see those stations are reporting less than 5% of moisture for those 1,000-hour fuels. A little better moisture as you move north, but they are starting to dry out as we have seen that drier, hotter weather over the past month across the Great Basin. So moving on, let's look at El Nino and La Nina. How will those affect us? Currently, we are in an ENSO neutral state. It looks like we are not seeing any effects currently from El Nino or La Nina. As we move into the winter months, that forecast may change a bit. It looks like there is a potential of an El Nino developing late this fall, early this winter. You can see in this September, October, November period, we really start to see the chances of El Nino neutral diminish with an increasing chance of El Nino. However, at this time, the forecasters who do the El Nino forecasts are expecting only about a 45% chance of that El Nino developing, but we will continue to watch that as it does have big impacts on our wintertime precipitation. So putting all these pieces together, looking at the drought, the weather, our live fuels, and our dead fuels, what happens from here? What are we expecting? Well, as far as the weather over the next few months, really a critical time period is July and what happens with the monsoon. And this weather outlook from our predictive service meteorologists calls for above normal precipitation across the south for July. This would suggest an enhanced monsoon. Now, this is a really critical component of the forecast because so much of the fire behavior in the southern part of the Great Basin does depend on this monsoon. It looks like the monsoon is a little bit delayed moving into July. We'll discuss that in a minute and how that will impact our fire potential forecast. But we are expecting by the end of July to see that normal monsoon returning to the Great Basin. As far as temperature for July, it looks like we should see about normal temperatures across the area. The potential for a little bit of cooler conditions across the southeastern part of the area with that monsoon. As we move into August, it does look like we are expected to continue to see that monsoonal moisture, maybe a little stronger than normal across the south, which we definitely depend on to suppress fire activity further south. But there is a potential for some drier conditions across portions of southern Idaho. And again, as we move into August, this forecast is calling for warmer conditions across the western part of the Great Basin. Finally, as we move into September, there is a potential to be quite dry across the western part of the Great Basin. Wetter conditions further east, as you would typically expect with the monsoon for at least the beginning part of September, usually decreasing pretty quickly in September, but a little warmer across the Great Basin as well. Now, this all being said, this is a weather forecast going out 4 months. Definitely hard to forecast what the weather will be doing that far out. But if we do see this come to fruition, or at least something close to this, this is kind of what we are basing that fire potential forecast on. So putting all those pieces together, let's take a look at our fire potential forecast for the next few months. So for July, quite a few colors on the map here. We are looking for below normal fire activity across the higher elevations of Idaho and Wyoming. That snow has melted off, but the fuels are still continuing to dry out from that above normal snowpack that we had up there during the winter. Also, we are expecting above normal fire potential across these areas in the map highlighted in red. Across the northern portions of Nevada, this, if you remember from our fuel loading slide, this is where we've had those reports of the really high fuel loading across Nevada. That combined with forecast dry conditions leads us to be concerned about the potential for high fire activity across Nevada with those fine fuels. Moving into Utah, it looks like at least through the beginning part of July that monsoon will be suppressed a little bit, or at least pushed further to the southeast. And so we are highlighting these portions of Utah in July with the assumption that monsoonal moisture won't make its way quite as far north or west as we typically see it. Now, if we do see a robust monsoon that covers much of southern and central Utah, we will not see this above normal fire activity. But for now, we are forecasting above normal for these areas of Utah with the assumption that the monsoonal moisture will be a little further south and east than we typically see it. As we move into August, we continue to be concerned about that high fuel loading. You can see this area highlighted on the map for August is pretty similar to that high fuel loading map. And so as we continue to see those fuels dry out moving into August, those fine fuels will play a big factor in fire activity moving into August. And then finally for September and October, we are looking to see that above normal fire potential continue across portions of northwestern Nevada. Taking a look at the National Fire Potential Outlook, quite active across the west as far as expected fire potential for July. That's that top left map, and you can see quite a few areas highlighted in red across the western U.S. with suppressed activity across the southeastern United States. As we move into August, the picture looks pretty similar with most of the expected activity across the western United States, a little quieter across the south and the southeast. Then finally moving into September and October, a few areas across the western United States, northwestern U.S., highlighted for that above normal fire potential. So that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is on the screen, and you can also find us on Twitter. Thanks.